I believe that a lot of the stuff escalated in this area because of false information that was put out.
Tonight, tensions and misinformation continue over the moderate livelihood lobster fishery in Nova Scotia.
I don't use alcohol. I don't use alcohol. He said, are you sure?
An elder says she faced racism from Winnipeg doctors and nurses when she went to the hospital.
Who's ready for an adventure?
And a Yukon education organization is bringing back traditional teachings to kids. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. Southwestern Nova Scotia continues to be tense after a week of violence by commercial fishermen. An emergency debate was held in the House of Commons last night, while Sipekne'katik First Nation Chief Mike Sack is still in talks with Canada. Here's Angel Moore with an update.
Hello, Winnipeg. I'm here at Soniavale Wharf, where Sipekne'katik First Nation launched their moderate livelihood fishery 1 month ago. Lobster harvesters are still checking their traps. Commercial fishermen say the stocks are low, and moderate livelihood fishery is a threat to the lobster. Chief Mike Sack says the Department of Fisheries and Oceans has released data that reveals Indigenous fishing has not had a negative impact on lobster stocks.
I believe that a lot of the stuff escalated in this area because of false information that was put out. The numbers were inflated, people were misled, and it's led us down this road of, a lot of racism and acts of terror. So
Sack says commercial fishermen do not need to be part of the negotiations. The House of Commons held an emergency debate last night. Here is Chief Sack's reaction.
It's unfortunate some people still don't respect the treaties that are out there for our people, but it's just the way it is, I guess, in Canada, and we'll keep working through it regardless of what happens at Parliament.
People here at the checkpoint are here to stay. Donation supplies are arriving as the weather is turning colder. Sipekne'katik community members are meeting this evening to determine how to proceed further. Back to you, Winnipeg.
And those tensions in Nova Scotia have dominated Parliament lately, including last night's emergency debate on the fisheries and the violence that has arisen. Jamie Pashagumskum brings us some highlights, but begins with today's COVID briefing, where Trudeau was asked why a Mi'kmaq moderate livelihood has not been negotiated after 21 years.
Over the past 21 years, many different governments have moved forward on granting licenses to Indigenous communities, on ensuring that there is progress being made.
The Prime Minister said his ministers have been in constant engagement and have been concerned from the beginning. This was something Opposition Leader Erin O'Toole disagreed with the night before.
So, my question to the Prime Minister is, when is the real work going to begin? Because, Mr. Speaker, I mentioned this to the Prime Minister a month ago, before Parliament reconvened, that tensions were rising. They ignored it then. The minister from the province ignored it for a year.
The debate went on until midnight. Chris D'Entremont is the MP for West Nova, ground zero of the dispute. He defended his constituents as not being racist. NDP MP Nikki Ashton, however, asked this question.
Will the member not agree that the first step to ending racially motivated violence is to call out the racism that's driving it and to defend the Indigenous community that is the target of this violence?
Member for West Nova in 30 seconds or less, please.
I would invite the member to come visit West Nova, to visit the beautiful Acadian communities that have existed since coming back from a deportation as the British kicked them out of Nova Scotia. Do you want to talk about racism? Let's talk about some of those very things. They are not a racist people. They are very concerned about the livelihood of their families. Shame on her for calling them racists.
Liberal MP Jaime Batiste spoke as a Mi'kmaq from his home community of Eskazoni. He said the Mi'kmaq have always had the right to fish.
In 1999, the court said that our right existed the whole time. And the fact that Mi'kmaq aren't looking for reparations or revenge, rather they're looking for reconciliation, shows our commitment to this country and our allies.
On Tuesday, Parliament focused on the WE scandal, as Conservatives brought forth a motion to form a committee to study Liberal corruption. If that motion passes, the government is threatening to call an election. Jimmy Pashagamskam, APTN National News, Ottawa.
To the global pandemic now, and almost everywhere in Canada, COVID-19 cases are rising, and First Nations communities are no exception. Communities in Alberta have the highest rate of cases in the country. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
According to Indigenous Services Canada, there have been over 1,000 COVID-19 cases across Canada in Indigenous communities since the outbreak began, with 14 deaths. Alberta has had 370, more than a third of the country's total. COVID is responsible for 12 deaths of First Nations people in Alberta. As of Monday, October 19th, there are 300 active cases for First Nations across the country. Alberta has 73. Muskachees, a community of 4 nations, announced they currently have 37 cases. Samson Cree Nation is the largest of the 4 communities. Chief Vernon Saddleback says the numbers are concerning.
We all knew that this was coming. This isn't a surprise. Maybe it was a surprise that it didn't hit us so hard the first time around, but definitely now our numbers have really gone up in our community. And I'm not sure what the color bandings are for the province are, but the color bands have kind of gone up for our community as per 100,000 for positive infections.
Chief Saddleback says he wants members to not shame those who have tested positive.
I know for everybody in Muskachees, I guarantee you probably know someone now who's tested positive. And we all need to change our attitudes about what this virus is. If a family catches it, if a person catches it, we need to lift that stigma. We need to have a lot more compassion.
AFN Alberta Chief Marlene Portra says she thinks after 6 months of COVID restrictions, people may be relaxing on COVID precautions.
I think a lot of people are experiencing COVID fatigue. They don't want to, they're tired of staying home. The mental health issues are on the rise. So there's just a lot of issues that we continue to face, but our messages need to be consistent in terms of, asking our people to continue to practice the good measures for protection.
Both Saddleback and Portra says the best practices to avoid COVID must be taken. Dr. Chris Serene is the Deputy Medical Officer of Health for Indigenous Services Canada. He says he is telling leaders to ask people to follow best measures.
That includes effective hand hygiene, physical distancing that must be maintained, especially in indoor settings, responding and respecting the indoor gathering size limits, which in the Edmonton area, for your information, is now recommended to be no greater than 15 people, and to recommend masking, continuous mask wearing in contexts where physical distancing cannot be maintained.
Dr. Serene says taking these measures will help prevent the spread. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Quebec's police watchdog lacks credibility when investigating complaints made by Indigenous people. That's what a report by an independent civilian observer says as she looked at how police forces handle allegations of assault or abuse by officers. APTN's Lindsay Richardson now explains how the report's recommendations will allow the watchdog to improve itself moving forward.
Quebec's Bureau des Enquêtes Indépendantes, or BEI, is called to investigate when a civilian is injured or killed during a police intervention. In 2020, they have several high-profile cases on their desk, including the police shooting deaths of Chantel Moore and Rodney Levi. Before the BEI was created in 2018, it was the Montreal Police Force, the SPVM, who investigated allegations of police violence. But according to an independent civilian observer, the forces fail to properly support Indigenous victims when a formal complaint is made.
The public at this moment has very little information it can base itself on to know what's going on.
Fanny Lafontaine, an attorney and university professor, says her recent report deconstructs colonialism in policing. It looks at 61 investigations of abuse towards First Nations and Inuit made over a 2-year period. It makes 25 recommendations for improvement in a number of areas.
Transparency, Indigenous representativity, training, etc., information to victim protection. But these great objectives are not made, the proposals are made to fulfill these objectives, but they're very specific. Amend Section X of that act. Amend, do this, adopt a strategy in a very specific way to fulfill the objectives.
In most cases examined, it took over a year to decide whether to lay criminal charges, and many times they weren't. For example, in 2019, the officers were cleared of wrongdoing after Jimmy Sivuak Elisialuk died in a Pavernatuk jail cell. Publicly, the BEI stated police complied with their investigation, but recently obtained personal emails say the opposite. Protocol was breached. Lafontaine says investigators need to show their hand.
That's why I call for much greater transparency, because at the moment we don't know anything or almost anything about the means deployed by the BEI to investigate a complaint made by an Indigenous person in Quebec against a police officer.
AFNQL Regional Chief Ghislain Picard says the report is evidence of systemic racism in policing. Quote, even if the government refuses to use this term, it cannot ignore the correctness of Maître Lafontaine's observations and recommendations. She also calls for more sanctions when officers don't cooperate. With Ian Lafrenière, a 30-year police veteran now leading Quebec's Indigenous Affairs portfolio and several reports to draw from, Lafontaine says she hopes Indigenous victims of police violence will soon be afforded a fair process right from the start. Lindsay Richardson, APTN National News, Montreal.
Well, do you think there will be positive changes at the Quebec Police Watchdog? We want to hear your thoughts. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca and leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube to share your thoughts. Time to step aside for a quick break. But coming up, look at the efforts to improve education for First Nations in the Yukon.
It's just a knowledge and an understanding, like the elders that are presenting it. They're explaining everything, and they're just engaging, and they're listening, and they're just, just really interested in what the activities is about.
Welcome back. Another story now on racism in the healthcare sector. An elder recently went to a Winnipeg hospital during the Labor Day weekend after feeling ill. While there, she claims she faced racism from staff and is now speaking out. Daryl Stranger has that story.
Bunnabonaby elder Sadie North was with her family during Labor Day weekend when she became sick. Sick enough that her daughter, former MKO Grand Chief Sheila North, had to take her to the Grace Hospital in Winnipeg. Due to COVID restrictions, North had to leave her mother alone at the hospital. Once inside, Sadie's condition worsened.
I could feel that I want my head wanted to go backward. I was already sick. I even couldn't form my words what to say.
She says the hospital staff were yelling at her and did not assist her in getting to the waiting room area. Eventually, a staff member pushed her into the hall where she threw up twice. North says the next thing she remembers is waking up in a bed with the doctor asking her questions about alcohol use, which she has never used.
I don't use alcohol. I don't use alcohol. He said, are you sure? I said, when you're diabetic and alcohol doesn't mix together. And on. He didn't even look at my infection on my leg. He didn't even look at it or even talk about it.
A bacterial skin infection on her leg turned out to be the cause of her sickness. A Grace Hospital statement provided on behalf of Chief Operating Officer Kelly O'Rourke reads, quote, in collaboration with WRHA Indigenous Health Services, we have been actively engaged with Elder North and her family over the last number of weeks to listen and to understand their concerns. We are sincerely sorry for her experience and have extended that apology to her and her family directly. Sheila North says the apology isn't enough.
I think that people like Dr. Ramadan and the clerk that was that berated my mom and treated her with such disrespect should be fired. They shouldn't have a job.
The North family is also putting in a complaint with the College of Physicians.
She always, in fact, told all of me and my siblings, don't say anything when people say anything to you, basically telling us, just, turn the other cheek. And so this is her motto. She doesn't stand, she lets, things slide because she's very forgiving. But she felt the need to stick up for herself during her stay there.
Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
With the education system in the Yukon found to be severely lacking for First Nations students last year, the territory's newly formed First Nations Education Directorate is beginning to roll out programs designed to further the education of its students. APTN's Sarah Connors attended one of these programs to see how First Nations children in the Yukon are benefiting from the new directorate.
Go get 'em!
These school children are learning to play traditional games and activities at a fish camp outside of Whitehorse.
Who's ready for an adventure? Me!
And they're also taking back an education system that was once lost in the Yukon. The day-long camp ran for 3 days, attended by students from 3 different schools in the Whitehorse area. It's just one program recently rolled out by the newly formed Yukon First Nations Education Directorate. The Directorate will help First Nations exert more control over the education of Indigenous students in the territory, while also working toward a separate school board. An Auditor General report released last year found only 49% of First Nations students entering grade 8 graduated within 6 years. Executive Director Melanie Bennett says the Directorate was formed because the current education system is failing First Nations students.
If we do it our way, all the different things that we would be less of, we would have less kids or less of our people that are being incarcerated. They'd know their language, they'd know their culture, they'd be completing school, all those pieces.
At the camp, children were treated to a day of traditional learning and activities, like games, traditional foods, and storytelling.
It's so much fun because I love the outdoors, and I feel like the clouds are making me see my friend, and I really like the smell of this forest.
Oh, we played hand games and went to see fish and then went to go see plants.
Tiana's grandmother, who's also an education advocate for the Directorate, says she's happy to see her granddaughter learning outside of the classroom.
It's just the knowledge and an understanding, like the elders that are presenting it. They're explaining everything, and they're just engaging, and they're listening, and they're just, just really interested in what the activities it's about.
So far, the Directorate has given away 30,000 pounds of salmon to First Nations families and has also helped secure close to $1 million to purchase devices for students impacted by COVID-19. While the Directorate is still targeted at First Nations students, Bennett says its objectives are meant for all Yukon children.
We don't need to have the same model of residential school, but on a First Nations pedagogy. We would have our own system with our own ways of knowing and doing, but it would be open to all.
Cut it up with for these guys.
And for elder and storyteller Chuck Hume, traditional learning is important for preparing the next generation and restoring what was once lost.
Somewhere down the road, they have to learn the life that we lived, where our stories come from, why we're so close to the looking after our countries.
The Directorate is also looking at rolling out more programs in the coming months, like a lifelong learning program and a mobile therapy unit. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Sure looks like a lot of fun. Time for another quick break, but still to come, a grass dancer in Alberta is set to compete on a big stage in the U.S.
I dance because I want to make my people proud.
Welcome back. Let's have a look now at our photo of the day. And today's photo of the day is of the beauty found along the Broken Head Wetland Trail, located just northeast of Winnipeg, Manitoba. Thanks to Mariah Johnson for sending us the picture. And you can send us your photos by emailing your shot to share@aptn.ca, and we'll do our best to get them on the air. Time now for a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 15 and showers for Halifax and St. John's. 2 under sunny skies in Nain, 5 in Happy Valley, Goose Bay. 19 with showers in Montreal, a rain-snow mix, and 3 for Chibougamau. 16 in showers in Toronto, 17 and rain in Ottawa. 6 with snow in Thunder Bay and Wawa, a rain-snow mix, and 2 in Sioux Lookout. 0 with snow for God's Lake and Norway House. +1 with snow in Winnipeg, 2 above in Barons River. -2 for Regina, Yorkton, and Saskatoon. -3 with snow in Uranium City and La Ronge. Over in northern Alberta, 5 below with snow in Fort McMurray and Fort Chip. 2 with a rain-snow mix in Medicine Hat and Lethbridge. 12 with showers for Vancouver and Victoria. -6 with snow in Fort Nelson and Dease Lake. 11 below in Old Crow, -6 in Whitehorse. -4 in Yellowknife, snow, and -6 for Norman Wells. 7 below with snow in Sax Harbor, -4 in Pawlatown. -3 in Baker Lake, Chesterfield, and Whale Cove. 15 below in Resolute, -4 in Clyde River. In Alberta, a Piikani man is hoping to bring Blackfoot grass dancing to the international stage. 19-year-old Tariq Crazy Boy has been selected to audition for America's Got Talent. Crazy Boy has been grass dancing since the age of 7. He will be performing for the judges virtually on November 14th. He says he's looking forward to sharing his passion with the world.
I dance because it makes me feel so good. I dance because I want to make my people proud. I want to make my community proud.
And we'll be cheering you on. The U.S. election is now just 2 weeks away. Tonight on an all-new episode of Face to Face, we discuss what's at stake for Indian country with longtime journalist Mark Trehan.
On the Democrat side, Indian country has a stake in trying to get more across-the-board sovereignty and support for things like violence against women. Jurisdiction is a big play for Democrats, where tribes would have the ultimate authority to decide within their governance structure. With Republicans, it'd be energy development and energy above all. Tribes would be great partners if they have coal reserves or other natural resources.
And you can catch that full episode of Face to Face in just a little over a minute's time. That is all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Tuesday. For much more, visit our website, aptnnews.ca, and never miss an update by downloading the APTN News app. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us. Have a great night.